Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Running with Eric. It's the first week of September and still have glorious weather here. It's gonna be over 80 again, so this is kind of an extended summer, which I'll always take because the weather and the seasons here are so short. So I am headed up Snow King, just about 2 miles up, 1,700 feet of climbing, and I'm gonna do it twice. And being it's 2019, the 10-year anniversary of the release of Born to Run book, I thought it would be fun to do a couple episodes on how we can learn from the Tarahumara Indians. So that's what today's episode's all about. But first, I'm gonna head up my first climb. I'm gonna do it twice, like I said. Chairlift's going, and we're gonna take you up the hill, up Snow King, the town hill. So here we go. See you up at the top. So as I start up Snow King, like I said, this is about a 2 mile climb, 1,700 feet. I don't do a flat warm-up. What I do is I force myself to be able to warm up on the steep beginning section of this and forcing myself to be patient. Running, racing, ultramarathoning, any type of racing and training takes patience. And by trying and forcing myself to learn to warm up on a steep grade like this forces me to be patient. So this is my warm-up, just starting up. So here we go. Just taking it super chill. All right, here we go. Okay, I'm just about two minutes in and I already have 100 plus feet of climbing. So still warming up, trying to take it as easy as I can. And like I said, I'm doing this twice. The key is to kind of keep it aerobic because I'll have about 80 total minutes of climbing today. So again, you can see that's what I gain in about 2-3 minutes. And coming out to the exposed, decided to go with a handheld bottle today because it's just easier to drink when you're focused and doing a lot of climbing. This is the section that gets a little technical and steep early on, so it's hard to really keep it easy, but just kind of dancing on the rock. Feeling pretty good. Nice and aerobic. Okay, it's about to get serious. Up. A little over 700 feet of climbing, 1.2 miles. Just a little over halfway. There's the whole fisheye lens. Probably doesn't do this justice, but 1.7 miles, 1,000 feet of climbing, and there's our summit switchback. So one more to go. Okay, here's our summit bid, last switchback. Starting to get a good view of the Tetons. Almost there. All right, there's summit number 1, getting Jackson Hole, and the Tetons coming into view. I'm gonna sit before I cool down too much. Just gonna ramble for a minute. For those, like I said, this is the 10-year anniversary of the publication of Born to Run, worldwide bestseller. And for those of you who have not read it, first, go out and read it. It's an amazing book. You'll love it on many levels. And secondly, for those who've not read Born to Run, I was part of a select few of elite American ultra runners, headed by Scott Jurek, who is kind of the pioneer of ultra running, specifically fast courses such as Western States 100, where he's won 7 times. But anyways, a group of us went down to run a 50-mile race with the Tarahumara Indians in the deep canyons of the Copper Canyon. And I was also the coach for the author of the book, Christopher McDougall. And he, long story short, he was a broken down runner, could never put things together and be injury free and to actually perform like he wanted to running. So he essentially went down with us to run this 50-mile race and was successful doing so. So that's kind of the backdrop of Born to Run. And what I want this episode to be about is really looking at the Tarahumara Indians and how they're developing their running as part of their culture, and how their run development leads them to being pretty good runners and very, very strong runners. So that's kind of where I want to leave this now. I'm going to head down and run back up, and once I get up here, we'll really dive into kind of some points of how we can all learn from them. All right, I'm headed down. See you on the next roundup. All right, lap number 2 complete. Headed over into trees to get some shade. So get rid of the glass. Back to the Tarahumara Indians. So let's dive into their running culture. Just like any kind of native culture who run, they do it for a variety of reasons. You know, sport brings people together, it galvanizes the community. It provides entertainment. They often bet while they run, have competitions between villages to villages. Some of the Hopi Indians in the southwest of America would run for spiritual reasons and as a form of a rain dance to bring the rain for their crops. So, you know, native cultures run for a variety of reasons. You know, that a lot of times they're used as messengers, running from village to village carrying messengers. But the Tarahumara Indians, they're known for their unique ball game. And they whittle a wood ball out of a tree branch about the size of a baseball, American baseball, and they kick that back and forth. And that's kind of their tribal race that brings the community together, not unlike the typical modern marathon where people come together and race and watch. So the running is their culture, and they're called the Renown, or the running people. And so what I want to dive into today with today's episode is why are they good runners? Why are they strong runners? What is it part of their culture and how they develop as runners into these great long distance runners who can run hundreds of miles injury free very strongly. So let's kind of look at the endurance aspect of it. So these runners live in the bottom of the Copper Canyon in Mexico, and this canyon is larger than the Grand Canyon, and it's similar to the Grand Canyon where it's basically down up and all these various canyons. So you're really running either up or down, and so there's no vehicles, or for the most part they're not using vehicles, and a lot of their mode of transportation is walking. So from day one, that first walk, that first step as an infant, they're walking to school, they're walking to transport to the store, to other villages, to visit people. So everything they're doing is walking. And because they live in canyons, it's typical that their walking is either up or down. And the reason they do a lot of walking on a daily basis, because they probably can't sustain a run because of this terrain on a daily basis. So the most efficient way is to walk. again, on a daily basis. As if we go back to the book Born to Run and the story, we trekked 30 miles from one village to the next before the race. So we went from Batopilas to Urique, where the race was in Urique. And so we trekked that 30 miles with the Indians, did the 50 mile race. The next morning after the race, those Tarahumara Indians trekked that same 30 miles back after running 50 miles. So transportation, walking, is their mode of transportation, is their foundation for endurance. And how we can do this is that because of their terrain, because they're going up and down, and even though they are walking, it's quite challenging. It's similar to us going out for a nice, easy, long run on flat terrain. The physiology is the same. And for those of you who have my book, The Cool Impossible, you know, going out for long, easy runs, I've mentioned this in many videos before, that most common mistake I see runners make is they make their long, easy stuff too hard. So again, for those of you who have my book, I'm talking, this is heart rate zone 2-3, or your speed zone 1. So very, very easy, just like the Tarahumara Indians transfer of walking. Same concept. Nice, easy, build your endurance that way. Okay. Second point is I refer back to the ball game that they play. And this is similar to soccer and lacrosse in the States. Is that, like I mentioned, they're kicking this ball back and forth as a team for many, many miles. You know, it could be, as an adult game, could be 50, 100 miles where they're kicking this ball back and forth as a team, advancing it back and forth for, like I said, 50, 60, 70, 80, up to over 100 miles. But what's interesting is the child game is done on a much scaled back version. When they're in school, they're doing maybe a couple miles at a time. Okay, and they're playing the same game, but it's not long distance, it's short distance. Okay, so this is doing two things. First, the obvious part is that now throughout this long game, they're sprinting back and forth to advance the ball. Okay, so it's almost like a fartlek run for us, where it's really fast and then easy, really fast and easy. Again, similar to a soccer game or lacrosse. Okay, so this is their speed. This is their speed development. And if we look at how this also translates to how the American or any type of long endurance progression happens, we look at the American way. In high school, in middle school, you are running maybe at cross country 2 to 3K distances. Then you go to high school and maybe you're running 5K distances. Then you go to college and you run 10K distances and 5K distances. Then maybe you do some post-collegiate racing. And eventually you hit 30 and you feel like you're old and you're losing some speed. So then you start to do a marathon. So what's happening is that we're developing speed first and applying that to distance later on as we get older and mature as runners. So again, a common marathoner is in their 30s. Okay. Tarahumara are doing the same thing with their ball game. As kids, they're playing the same game as the adults, but they're doing a much shorter distance, and they're still training for speed while they're walking and doing their easy long endurance. And then as they get older and they can progress to the adult game, that's when it starts to get longer and longer. So again, they're building a foundation of speed. And I see kind of with the proliferation of marathon races and ultramarathon races, the popularity of these people coming into the sport for the first time, they're focused so much on having to go the distance and, hey, I need to get my long run, and they're missing the speed development similar to the Tarahumara do with their ball game, and similar to how our institutional structure within the States and other countries progress their athletes to, as they get older, they start going longer and longer. So I would say if you're new to the sport, you're jumping into these marathons and ultra marathons, look to do the shorter races first and foster your speed. Build speed first, get better at your speed, and then apply that to longer races, and your development's going to be much more progressive and continue on for much, much longer. And there's not going to be this second mistake I see where there's just so much focus on running long and moderate. Okay, going back to Born to Run, Christopher McDougall, who did the 50-mile race, the author who I coached, he was doing just moderately long runs all the time, and he was breaking down. Okay, so if there's one thing that the Tarahumara aren't doing, is doing a lot of long, moderate running. They're doing a lot of easy walking and a lot of very fast. So it's on both ends of the spectrum and not much in between. Okay, so maybe look at it that way, is what aren't they doing? Okay, but again, I see a lot of runners doing everything that they're not doing, and that's where we can learn from them. Okay, so 2 more points that maybe aren't as obvious as what the Tarahumara Indian are doing. Let's look at their terrain. I mentioned, it's a lot of canyons, a lot of up and down. So the running that they are doing when they are running uphill is a lot of threshold and sub-threshold running, similar to what I did today on Snow King, where I did two laps up Snow King. I kept it just below threshold, aerobic, so I'm able to, that's very, very trainable, okay? Sub-threshold, again, those of you who have my book, this is zone 5 heart rate and zone 4 speed. That's very, very trainable. Keeping it just under threshold or just at threshold, I'm able to increase my endurance at that. And so I can go longer and longer and longer, or harder, faster, faster at an aerobic level of effort. So that's what they're doing on these canyons when they are running, is that they're going a lot harder than just a moderate effort. Okay, and so again, these intervals are shorter. I don't have my athletes do much more than a 30-minute interval at any one time, because it's so taxing on the brain. They very rarely will do much more than that unless we are training the brain. But that happens very, very seldom. Okay. Lastly, going to their terrain that they run on, the fields that they do their ball game on are almost similar to stuff like this, where they're having to navigate a lot of vegetation, and that's forcing them to have high knees and keeping their foot strike underneath them. You look at the terrain, they're either running up or walking up and running down. They're keeping their foot strike underneath them, and that's great strength. Their trails are very, very primitive, very, very technical, very, very rocky, so they don't have the opportunity to overstride. Their cadence is very short and very quick. Did a video on cadence and the importance of that a couple weeks ago, so check that out. So they're short, very quick cadence. Again, everything is underneath them. They use their muscles very, very well, and this, I think, really adds to their longevity. We raced athletes who were well over 50 years old that were still performing at a high level, that again appeared to be just as good as ever. So I think this really adds to their longevity. So again, go back to working on cadence and keeping everything underneath you. We'll dive into other videos. This is going to be part 1 of a couple series of what we can learn from the Tarahumara Indians, and kind of getting into their shoes and all that, and the strength training aspect. But from a cadence standpoint, their terrain, like I said, is very, very primitive. So they're forced to keep their foot strike underneath them, which is so important. So, all right, kind of a long one today. Thanks for sticking around. I hope that's helpful. Hope that kind of brings some light to the Tarahumara Indians and how they train, and hope you maybe have some questions. So put them down below, and I'll kind of put out a few more of these in relation to what we can learn from them. So thanks again. We'll see you next time. Over and out.